you on board. So without further delay, I would like to introduce you all to our today's speaker, Mr. Fanijyoti Sharma, who will speak on well integrity and barriers. Mr. Fanijyoti Sharma completed his BE in Mechanical Engineering with first class first from Jorhat Engineering College, Dibrugarh University in the year 1987. He completed his ME in Industrial Engineering and Management from Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand in the year 1994. He is a petroleum engineering specialist having 32 years of experience in production engineering and technology, well completion, well interventions, well services and well integrity management. He is also appointed as external to evaluate final year BTech students' projects, works in Industrial Engineering Department of IIT Roorkee in 2019. He has worked in Oil India Limited Duliajan, Moran, Cairn Energy India Private Limited Chennai, Petroleum Development Oman, Muscat, Cairn India Limited Barmer, Vedanta Limited, Cairn Oil and Gas Gurgaon, and presently working as petroleum engineering specialist. Some of his achievements are SME in well intervention techniques and well integrity management, conceptualized and implemented pumpless bowser loading facilities in oil, introduced hydraulic SRP unit, first of its kind in India, to test exploratory wells in Cairn, conducted 90 meters long horizontal perforation using CIRP techniques in PDO, implemented cement packer concept to assess uncompleted zones in Cairn, introduced robotics tools for well intervention to unlock trapped pay zones in Cairn. So we are really very honored to have you here with us today. I'm sure everyone is eagerly waiting for you to start with the session. But before that, I would like to request everyone to kindly mute themselves and keep their video off so that our speaker can proceed through the session smoothly. Also, in the meantime, you can drop your queries in the chat box present in the top right corner of your screen. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nazrana. And it's a pleasure to have such a great audiences, right from the students, faculty members, as well as the industry expert across the various globe. Without further delay, let me start with my presentation on well integrity and barriers. So today's agenda, I'll be covering a brief on about the elements of well. What are the hazards associated with oil and gas well? Well integrity definition. Well integrity barrier concept. Well life cycle barriers in different stages of well life. So well life cycle starts with the design phase and ends at the well abandonment. And finally, I will touch upon well integrity management with an example if the time permits. So here it goes about the various elements of well. I'm sure everybody is very familiar, but why I'm just giving the picture so that all the elements are very, very essential, and in terms of well integrity management, well integrity barriers. So our objective when we drill a well, the objective is to produce oil and gas or to inject something into the formation. And in order to reach the formation depth from the surface or from the water, we, depending on the lithology as well as the various parameters, casing is designed, or casing, different types of stages of casing needs to be completed. So in general, this is a typical diagram of a well where you can see the surface casing, which is cemented, the products intermediate casing, which is again cemented.
Sir, you haven't presented your screen.
Is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have not shared Is it? Okay. Now is it visible?
Now, yes, sir, it's fine.
Yeah, it's visible, funny.
Okay, now you can see, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I will start it again. So the today's topic is well integrity and barrier. So I hope everybody is seeing this presentation, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so today's agenda is I'll be covering the elements of a well. What are the hazards associated with oil and gas well? The well integrity definition, well integrity barrier concept. Just a minute. Well life cycle, barriers in different stages of the well life cycle. Any feedback? Okay, so well integrity management with an example if the time permits. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with this, various elements of the well, but I'm just depicting the schematic of the well, various equipment, because those are the actually constituents or component of the well barrier and well integrity. So in a well, in general, you can have the surface casing, you can have the intermediate casing, and finally you reach the bottom formation with the production casing. Once the casing is done, casing is cemented, we need to complete the well with the completion jewelries, which is called tubings, as well as other jewelries. And on the top, there are the various access mechanism to monitor the annulus. When you say annulus, annulus is between the production tubing and the production casing. Some noise is coming. Hello. Am I audible to everybody?
We can
Yes,
hear you.
I think admin can mute the rest of the participant. Yeah, I can see some participants.
Yeah, some noise is coming from somewhere. So let us mute the all microphones in other side so that you can clearly hear my presentation.
So I have muted
Okay.
everyone, so you can proceed with the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Okay. Thanks. So these are the various elements of a well, and on top of the wellhead, we have the Christmas tree, and various components of the Christmas trees are master valves, the flowing valves, swap valves, as well as a killing valve. Swap valves and the swap cap is required for the live intervention in the well during the production phase. So before going to the well integrity and barriers, we also need to know what are the hazards associated with oil and gas well. Unless we know the hazards, we will not be able to do the mitigation process. So it is very essential that what are the hazards associated with the oil and gas well, and then based on the hazards, we mitigate the mitigation plan, the barriers, and the well integrity concept. So one of the hazards associated with oil and gas is the pressure. And when we talk about pressure, which pressure we are talking about? This is a formation pressure, wellhead pressure, or the pumping pressure during the various stages of well intervention process. Second hazard could be the temperature. And this, as you go down from the surface to the formation, the geothermal gradient increases. That means the temperature is increasing. So wellbore equipment has to be capable to withstand the different temperature regime during the different stages of well life. During the drilling phase, the well will see the cold fluid. However, during the production phase, well, we'll see the hot fluid. So there will be temperature fluctuations, and we need to ensure that our wellbore equipment is robust enough to handle the temperature hazard. Other hazard is the hydrocarbon fluid itself. These fluids are volatile. These fluids are flammable. On top of that, some of the formations produce some of the corrosive fluids like H2S or carbon dioxide, which are not only corrosive, these are poisonous and health hazard too. We have observed that in some of the formations also produce the naturally occurring radioactive material, say for example barium sulfate, so which is health hazard. Drilling fluid, when we are drilling a well, drilling fluid itself consisting of various chemicals which are hazardous to the people, which are hazardous to the equipment we are using. And the stimulation fluid, it could be even acid. So these are the hazards, and based on this hazard, our well should be designed in such a way that the well is capable to handle this hazard, and we have the right barriers in place. So pictorial representation of some of the hazards. So you can see the old well which is not connected, that means not getting produced, probably it is abandoned, and you can see there are certain parts are missing, like look at the wellhead, no annulus valve is available. However, I can clearly visualize that the production pecker is holding, and that's why there is no leak from the annulus side, and that could be, I mean, that's my guess. And if you look at the production side, there is an oil spill happening, and the whole environment is creating a hazardous situation. So another hazard, say this is a production well, and you can see there is a massive leak somewhere in the wellhead. As a result, gas is coming out and a gas cloud has been formed. So these are the hazards we are talking about. And if hydrocarbon gets ignited, and this could be the scenario. Probably you have seen these photographs before also. Okay. Next, the hydrostatic pressure and the formation pressure. The formation is always trying to come up, and hydrostatic pressure during the drilling phase. So we have to ensure that our hydrostatic pressure overcomes the formation pressure, so that we can control the formations as well without allowing the formation to flow to the surface during the drilling phase. And this is a simple calculation for the hydrostatic head calculation actually. So how do you estimate your mud weight? It's a true vertical depth, right, multiplied by the mud weight in ppg, and multiplied by this constant factor 0.052 gives you the hydrostatic pressure in psi, and that's how you can estimate what will be the mud weight required to successfully drill a certain formation. So temperature, as I said, temperature increases with the depth. So you can see it in this graph. Yellow graph is the geothermal gradient. It is gradually increasing from the surface to the bottom. But during the production phase, all the wellbore equipment will be exposed to the production hot fluid. As a result, the temperature in tubing, temperature in different annulus, all the metallurgies will be increasing, and that is depicted by different curves over here. What does that mean? That our well equipment will be exposed to different temperature regime at different point of times. Cold fluid during the drilling time or the intervention time. Hot fluid during the production time. And our equipment has to be capable to handle such a harsh environment, which is which needs to be considered during the design phase itself. H2S hazard is very toxic, deadly. It is also corrosive, and H2S can corrode all the equipment if it is not properly designed, and it is flammable. So H2S, if you ignite, then it produces sulfur dioxide, which is again a health hazard. And apart from the health hazard, H2S odor is also considered to be public nuisance. The smell is rotten egg, and you can smell only the if the H2S concentration is less than a certain percentage. So H2S concentration, if it is less than 10 hours, then we can say it is if people can work up to close to about 8 to 10 hours with this concentration. However, if the concentration is increased between 10 ppm to 15 ppm, it is called moderately dangerous, and probably the people can be exposed in this environment not more than 2 hours. But as soon as the H2S is increasing beyond 15 ppm, then it is dangerous. Other hazards, as I talked about, the norms, the naturally occurring radioactive materials, drilling fluid, stimulation fluid, and many more. As we progress, we will be learning. So that we talked about the hazards and the consequences of the various hazards. Now, what is the well integrity definition? There are different definitions on well integrity. As per the NORSOC P10, the well integrity is defined as application of technical, operational, and organizational solution to reduce the risk of uncontrolled release of formation fluid throughout the life of a well. As per ISO, well integrity refers to maintaining full control of fluids within a well at all times by employing and maintaining one or more well barrier to prevent unintended fluid movement between formations with different pressure regime or loss of containment to the environment. And OISD is an Indian regulation. The instantaneous state of a well, irrespective of purposes, value, or age, which ensures the veracity and reliability of barriers necessary to safely contain and control flow of fluid within or connected to the well. So, in nutshell, well integrity definition refers to the containment of hydrocarbon fluids by having the appropriate barrier. And in the subsequent slides, we will be talking about the barriers. And as the NORSOC or other standards talks about, the well integrity barriers are the technical barriers, which is well itself, the plant, the operational barrier, the procedures, and the organizational barrier is the people. Now, it is not at all possible, there will be loopholes in the technical barriers, in the operational barriers, and the organizational barriers. However, if all these loopholes gets aligned, then reservoir, all hazards will be exposed to the environment. The accident happens. So, because of the failure, various blowout has occurred, various incident has occurred, and one of the incidents was the Mackendal Deepwater Horizon. It happened in 2010. 3.19 million barrels of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. 11 people lost their life, and a huge financial loss, $65 billion US. Another incident, Tyota's gas well blowout, which happened in Oklahoma in 2018. What was the cause? The failure of the primary barrier. And on top of that, the crew failed to activate the secondary barrier. As a result, this incident has happened and 5 people lost their life. So there are many instances of well integrity barrier failures while working on the well or while operating the well. So we need to have the barrier concept very clear, and we need to have the process in place so that all the time we maintain the barrier. And that is where the concept of well integrity barrier is coming on. So well barrier. What is well barrier? Well barrier in general are envelopes of one or several dependent wellbore equipment, preventing fluids or gases from flowing unintentionally from the formation to another formation or to the surface. And all the time, we need to have the two barriers in place. I think some noise is coming from somewhere. Okay. So barrier types, the primary, the secondary barrier. What is the primary barrier? It could be the fluid column, or it could be a mechanical barrier which prevents protection against unintended flow of the hydrocarbon. Secondary barrier is that activated when the primary barriers fail. So that means primary barriers fail, the hazard is coming through the primary barrier, and the secondary barrier now gets activated and protects. There is another barrier which is called tertiary barrier, and tertiary barriers are nothing but the shear and blind ram of BOPs or shear shield valve, and these tertiary barriers are used during the well intervention, be it rigless or rig, during the drilling time, during the workover time, or during the well intervention time. So, well, barriers formation is always trying to come out once the barrier is failed. And what are the barriers? The casing, the cement, the wellhead. During the drilling time or during the intervention, the BOP and the rams, the tubular itself, safety valve. It could be the downhole safety valve. It could be the surface safety valve. And choke and kill line valves during the drilling or intervention time, and Christmas tree valves during the production time. So function, it prevents unintentional flow of fluid from the formation to another formation or to the surface. That is a function of well barrier. So it okay. And shutting the well during an emergency situation. That is the second function. And the main function is it secures the well integrity. And well integrity, when we talk about well integrity, we are talking about the well health. Now, the well undergoes the different life cycle. So as I said, the well life cycle starts at the design phase and it ends in the well abandonment phase. So in the design phase, we need to define the various parameters based on the hazards. And once the well is designed, and it goes for the construction, being the rig to construct the well. So that is the second phase of the well life cycle. Third phase is once the construction is done, completion is put, and third phase is a production phase. And this is the longest phase of the life. Various interventions are being done either to enhance the production or to maintain the well or rectify certain mechanical failures. And once the well life cycle ends and it goes for the abandonment, where we need to permanently abandon the well. So the well life cycle starts at the design phase, then getting executed in the construction phase. The longest life is the production phase, and then abandonment phase. Now, during the various different phases or different stages of life, the barrier concept changes. So I will go through the various stages of well life and what are the barriers. Well integrity, the teamwork. It is not the job of the well integrity engineer. And people cannot work on silo. If you work on silo, this could be the end result, right? The cartoon, and it is not on the cartoon. Exactly this kind of situation has happened in real life. So it is a integrated and interactive approach consisting of drilling engineers, the completion engineers, the subsurface team, the surface team, and the service providers. So the design phase. What do we do? The design phase, we need to identify the various hazards about at the hazard phase, which is subsurface pressure, what formation fluids we are going to handle, the temperatures, expected flow rate, and possible treatment required during the well life cycle. Also, the operating philosophy. Once we identify the hazards, we identify the philosophy, then we design the basis of well and design the tubing. And once we design the tubing, then we can design the casing. Our casing should be capable to whatever the jewelries we are going to put in the tubing. So based on that, the casing size is determined, and based on the lithology, based on the depth, the various stages of casing are designed. The wellhead is designed. Also, we need to design. We need to identify what will be the artificial lift during the production phase. Do I need to do any kind of additional treatment in order to enhance the production? Maybe fracturing or maybe stimulation. So these are the factors needs to be considered during the design phase itself. And once the factors are identified, then we need to determine the various operating envelope during the well life cycle. And how do we determine the various envelope? The maximum surface pressure, what we are going to see in case of complete evacuation, in case of any failure. How much pressure I need to pump to kill the well? Do I need to have a provision for the fracturing? If yes, what will be my fracturing pressure? So these all factors determine the maximum working pressure of the wellhead and the tree. And this also will be translated to the downhole pressures, which will be the input for various load cases, for the design of casing, for the design of tubing. And ultimately, by designing, we determine what casing or tubulars grade we are going to put in the well. Also, the metallurgy of the tubing or flow weighted region will be determined based on the formation fluid and what are the corrosiveness of the formation fluid, or even during the treatment period. So if the well is producing H2S, depending on the concentration of the H2S, the partial pressure of the H2S, we need to identify which tubing or which casing material we need to put into the well. So this charts depicts about the different region of the H2S hazards, as well as carbon dioxide is also a hazard. So what happens? The different metallurgy has the different corrosion rate for the carbon dioxide, and based on the well life, whatever the well life we are going to design, then we need to select the appropriate material for the tubing as well as casing, and mainly the flow weighted region. And if we fail to identify those parameters, then there is bound to be some failures. And these are the 4 pictures. 2 are the surface in the tested condition, which is casing is exposed to the burst pressure, and this one is the collapse. This is a test condition, and in real life, this is the condition when the right material is not put in the well. So H2S corroded tubing. And there is another picture which is depicting real life collapse, casing collapse, and this has been captured with the downhole video camera. So once the design phase is over, we come to the construction phase, the execution phase. In the execution phase, we mobilize the right equipment to construct the well. We need to ensure that well control equipments are certified and function tested, because this well control equipment will act as secondary barrier during the construction phase. People competency, and we need to also define that the responsibility of the people working while constructing the well, and mobilize right construction material. So design is saying, okay, we need to have this casing, this particular metallurgy. However, in reality, if that is not available, then it may lead to certain disasters. So we need to mobilize the right construction material for constructing the well. And what is the primary barrier during the well construction? In the well construction, the mud is the primary barrier. However, always remember that mud is considered to be a barrier only if it can be monitored and it can be conditioned. If that provision is not there, mud is never considered as a barrier. And the secondary barrier is the BOP. BOP has to be certified, function tested, and the barrier envelopes are casing, cement, wellhead, etc. So in the next picture, you can see during the well construction phase, the primary barrier is always the fluid column. And the secondary barrier is the casing, the cement behind the casing, the wellhead, the high pressure riser, and the drilling BOP. So the barrier concept during the construction phase. Now, when you go to the next phase, the barrier concept changes. Okay, before going to the next phase, now once the well is constructed, the well acceptance needs to be carried out by verifying the barriers. And this is the job of well integrity or the technical authority or a designate. So he will verify, the team will verify the design, the cost versus the construction equipment. Sometimes, and in real life, what happens, design says some different material, and in reality, something else has been put, maybe based on the availability or sometimes by mistakes. And I have found out similar kind of variation, the deviation has happened in my life. So we need to identify, we need to verify the barriers, and we need to ensure that whether this well is acceptable or not. If there is a deviation, then the risk and mitigation analysis needs to be carried out. And the risk and mitigation analysis will talk about, is it acceptable or not? It may be acceptable, or it may be acceptable with certain controls in place. Then a dispensation has to be formulated with a periodic review and decide the further course of action after periodic review. And if the deviation is not acceptable or not manageable, then what is the next step? We need to plug and abandon the well. So that was the barrier concept during the well construction phase. Now well production. Now once the well is constructed, it is put on the production. So during the well production phase, what are the barrier concept? So this is the well diagram, and as we go on, we'll talk about the different primary barriers in the production well. So the production casing below the tubing. So you can see this gray color becomes the blue. And as we go on, it will identify the various barriers of a production well. So production casing below the production packer is a primary barrier. The cement behind the casing below the production packer is the primary barrier. The production packer itself is a primary barrier. The tubing, the completion string is primary barrier. The tubing hanger, it has different sets of seal. So tubing hanger, a part of the tubing hanger constitute the primary barrier. And the surface production tree, particularly keying valve and the swap valve, these are the constituents, and these are the called primary barriers. Now coming to the secondary barriers. The secondary barriers is behind the primary barriers. Once the primary barriers fails, it gets activated. So in this case, the production casing above the packer is the secondary barrier. The production casing cement behind above the packer, it is the secondary barrier. The annulus valve, then your tubing hanger itself. As I said earlier, tubing hanger constitute two different sets of seals. So one set of seal act as a primary barrier. The second set of seal act as a secondary barrier. Then the surface production tree, particularly the flowing valve, the master valves, those are the secondary barriers, and those are the actually closable barriers. Once it needs to be closed, or as we talked about the various functions, so this will be activated at that point of time. The crown valve, crown cap is a secondary barrier, and the blind flange near the towards the keying side, this is a secondary barrier. So these are the barrier concept during the well production phase. So okay, this is the same one. However, this barrier concept is only for the naturally flown well, but the well may not be naturally flown, so you need to put the certain artificial lift. Then your barrier concept also changing depending on the surface equipment. So in PCP well, the stuffing box remaining all are same as the production barriers, production well. The what are the changes? The Christmas tree changes basically. So your primary barrier is the stuffing box and the ball valves towards the other side, and the secondary barrier is the BOP, the PCP BOP, and the flowing side. In a sucker rod pump, the same primary barrier is the stuffing box. It is as similar as the PCP wells. In a gas lift well, it is a little bit different. Hello? Yeah? Anything you want? Hello? Okay, no, I think it is. Hello? Am I audible?
Yeah, sir.
So we can hear you.
Huh? Yes. So am I audible to everybody, right?
Fine, you go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. So in a gas lift well, the barrier concept changes particularly because we are inducing the pressure in the annulus, and that's why the annulus valve becomes the primary barrier. And the casing, the production casing also becomes a primary barrier. Remaining is as it is, as good as the production wells. So these are the barrier concept during the production phase. Now, as I said, the production phase is the longest phase of a well. So in order to maintain the health of the wellhead or the Christmas tree, we need to carry out the preventive maintenance as we normally do with our car. So we have to do the regular preventive maintenance of our car. So similarly, we need to maintain all the equipments in the well so that it all the time the two barriers are available. And the other thing is that we need to also do certain monitoring so that we ensure that there is no barrier issue between the tubing and casing or between the casing and casing. So that how do you do that? That is by regularly monitoring the annulus pressure. Then during the production phase, we intervene the well for surveillance purposes to collect the data. It could be the production surveillance or it could be the integrity surveillance. And also we intervene the well for the production maintenance or production enhancement. So we do the stimulation, we do the perforation, reperforation, or maybe the zonal change out. So intervention is required during the production phase. Or sometimes we need to do the rig intervention, which is workover, in order to repair the integrity job, or in order to do any other production related repair. So we do the workover. So during the production phase, basically it is the longest phase of the well life, and we need to do various maintenance as well as various intervention. That's why during the intervention, the barrier concept changes from the production phase. So this is the well, and the well is depicting the barriers during the flowing condition. Now this well needs to be intervened, say for example with the coil tubing. So what are the changes we are doing? We are closing some of the primary and some of the secondary valves, which are swap valves and the master valves and the flowing valves, and then we remove the secondary barrier in the queuing side as well as the cap side, the swap side, and then we rig up the coil tubing equipment, pressure control equipment. Also we rig up pumping to the queuing side. So now in this intervention process, the barrier concept changes. The bottom section barrier is the same, remains same, whereas the coil tubing itself become the primary barrier. And the stripper is the primary barrier of the coil tubing intervention. The lubricator is a primary barrier, and the coil tubing BOP is a secondary barrier. So you see the difference. Similarly, when you intervene with the wire line, it could be E-line, it could be slick line. So you rig up your E-line equipment, say for example, the barrier concept changes. Now in this case, the grease injection port becomes a primary barrier, the lubricator becomes a primary barrier, and the BOP, E-line BOP becomes a secondary barrier. Now coming back to the workover phase. Now again, this one is the production phase barrier. So we will change the barrier while going to do a workover. How do you do it? We set the plugs. And before setting the plugs, actually we have to change the wellbore to the killing fluid. So the kill fluid becomes the primary barrier, or the brine, whatever we use for the workover, and which needs to overcome the reservoir pressure. So this becomes the primary barrier, and we put additional mechanical barrier in the tubing or in the tubing head hanger, and install the BOPs. Now the BOP becomes the secondary barrier, and then we pull out the tubing, and then we carry out the workover operation. So barrier concept changes from production to the workover, or production to the coil tubing, or production to the wire line. These are the production phase. our next phase is the permanent abandonment phase. What is the permanent abandonment? Well status where well or part of the well will be plugged and abandoned permanently and with the intention of never being used or re-entered again. Why do we need to do the permanent abandon? To prevent the hydrocarbon leak to the surface. We have seen in one of the pictures, the hydrocarbon is leaking in an abandoned well. So to prevent, in order to, non-usable well, we need to do the permanent abandon. Isolate permeable zones, prevent cross flow. Prevent contamination of the freshwater aquifer. Enable removal of the mechanical installation below the surface or the seabed. And obviously, every country has their own regulatory requirement, and that is why also we need to do the permanently abandon the non-usable well. And what is the application? This permanent abandonment applicable to the exploration and appraisal well, because exploration by definition you are exploring and identifying the prospect, but the well never going to be used for the production except in some cases, of course. And similarly, appraisal well, to collect the data, and based on the appraisal well and the exploration well, you prepare your development plan and prepare your development well. And at the end of the economic life of the field, you need to abandon the well or any other well, even any other well which has certain issues or not operated or not required for the purposes need to be abandoned. This picture, this is a abandoned well. Is it safe to keep it like this? Possibly no. So what do we do? So in a plug and abandonment process, we put various cement plug across the reservoir. So this is one of the reservoir, right? This is before the plug and abandonment. This is a situation. By using the plug and abandonment process, we put the cement, primary and secondary, on top of the reservoir, so that, or in between the two reservoirs, so that there is no cross flow. Then again we put the primary and secondary on top of the flow zone, and finally we need to put the surface plug as an environmental barrier, and ultimately we remove the Christmas tree, we remove the wellhead and part of the casing materials. So this is one of the real life example of pre and post permanent abandonment, and this was done under my supervision. Basically, I was leading that project. So this one was the before the plug and abandonment, and for the statutory requirement purposes, this was an exploratory well. So we wanted to do the abandon this well, and we used the rigless abandonment process without using the rig. And finally, this was the final picture. I mean, the final status of the well. So these are the barriers we talked about. So at different stages of the life. Now, a bit of well integrity management system. So in principle, the well integrity management system should assure that the well integrity is maintained throughout the well life cycle by the application of a combination of technical, operational, and organizational process. So well operation and management system, we talked about. Remember these slides I have shown at the beginning of the presentation. There are three barriers we talked about: the plant, the technical barrier, and most of the time in the last slides, I have been talking about the plant barrier. On over and above, we have to have the operational barriers, which are talking about the policies and procedures, and also the people barriers, so that our people dealing with the well operations are competent enough to deal and understand the barrier concept. So guideline, I have briefly touched upon, but there are several guidelines. The OISD guideline is there for India. NORSOC guidelines are there. API guidelines are there. ISO guidelines are there. These are the standard guidelines evolved throughout the development of the industry. And based on this, every company needs to define their policies on the safety procedures, process safety management, well construction and operation minimum standard policies, well integrity management policies, well barrier and compliances policies, and so on. And based on the policies, also every company needs to define the various procedures so that wells can be operated and managed safely. Some of the procedures could be well design and cementing procedures, well operation procedures, annulus pressure management procedures, well intervention procedures. When you talk about well intervention procedures, it is a generic term I am using. It could be the coil tipping intervention procedures, because every well intervention procedures is different from the equipment type. For the rig, the completion procedures or rig intervention procedures is different than the coil tipping procedures or the E-line procedures. So every company should have the proper or robust procedures in place, and then also need to have the well acceptance criteria and trace procedures or policies recommending any urgent repairs or the requirement of critical well barrier envelope. Wellhead maintenance procedures also needs to be there so that you regularly maintain your wells. And apart from this, you should have a management system in place which talks about you may be having the permit to work system. You may be having having the well operation workflow process management system. And in case of any variations, changes, you must have the dispensation and the change management system. Also, management should have the competency management system so that they can develop the people. They have monitoring mechanism that their people and procedures are robust enough to deal with the well operation and management. So people competency, when you talk about people competency, as I said, the barrier concept starts at the beginning. Barrier concept is different during the drilling construction phase. Again, in the production phase, barrier concepts are different. So the people working in the field or people designing should be competent enough to do the job. So well integrity management is another competency required. So these are the, in nutshell, in terms of the well integrity, well operation and management system. And in case of any deviation, now we need to carry out certain diagnostic or mitigation. And how do we do it? We need to follow a certain process. So the first process of the diagnostic is the data collection and the functional analysis. We ensure that what the barrier are put for a certain functions. So are these barriers is capable to carry out the function? And the other data collections like annulus pressures, or we need to do certain investigation log. Then comes the scenario modeling. In the scenario modeling, we do identify the risk. So once the data is collected, we identify the risk. So what are the risks associated? And once we identify the risk has to be quantified. So I'll come back to this SART risk quantification, and obviously once the quantification is done, then we need to have a risk mitigation action plan. And the risk mitigation action plan, if we find that these risk mitigation action plans brings the risk down and manageable condition, then we operate the well. Otherwise, we do not operate the well. So in risk mitigation analysis, what are the key elements? So, okay, we identify the risk. As I talked about in the previous slide, we identify the risk, and then we need to identify what are the impact of those risks. What are the consequences? So this table is basically a matrix of consequence versus the likelihood, and with the below table is talking about the analysis. So we identify the risk or hazard, and also identify the impact or consequences. It could be negligible or it could be catastrophic. And what are the likelihood of that occurrence? It could be rare or it could be almost certain. Based on this, the whole score, a score is assigned, and if it is within the green side, then it is acceptable, or you can operate the well safely. If it is in the red zone, you will not be able to operate the well. And then what do you do then? You need to put certain mitigation process. With the mitigation process, you reduce either consequences or reduce either probability. And based on the final score, if it is coming below, coming to green level or yellow or high level, then with a certain mitigation process or certain regulation, periodic regulation, you can still operate the well. So I'll just towards the end, I'll put the one of the case. Say for example, we are putting the cement behind the casing, and first of all, we need to know why do we need to put the casing, put the cement. So this picture depicts, there are various zones, right from the aquifer zones. There may be some coal or shallow gas zones, some other zones which is non-economically producible, or the main reservoir. So we are passing through all these zones by putting or by drilling and placing the casing. But we need to isolate behind, behind the casing, so that there is no flow behind. So the another objective of placing the cement is to prevent contamination of the freshwater aquifer. Right. So prevent formation fluid coming out to the surface. If we do not have any cement, what will happen? The reservoir fluid will come out, or maybe shallow gas will come out. So by placing the cement at various stages against the casing, so we prevent the fluid coming out of the surface and ensure that sustained annulus pressure is below mass value. If the isolation is not good, then the other casing could be exposed to the formation pressure which is not designed for, and the zonal isolations between the various zones. So in case of batch cement, now this is design, this is intention. However, while execution, everything do not go perfectly, right, as we plan. So what do we do in case of batch cement? We do repair the cement job. However, unfortunately, the success rate of cement job is very less. So then what? If you do not want to do cement repairing job, then what? Then we need to identify the extent of damage, and we need to analyze identify, can we manage by putting some mitigation. So that is where the risk analysis mitigation is coming. And if the mitigation, if the well can be acceptable by putting the mitigation, then a dispensation or sense management will be placed, and dispensation monitoring mechanism in periodically we have to monitor. So I am showing a real life example of cement quality. So these are the two pictures. So you can very well say, observe that in this particular picture, there are patchy cement, some good cement in this region and this over there. But if you look at the VDL, you can very clearly see the reflection of the VDL. That means your cement is very, very bad. And there may be communication. These are the qualitative, diagnostic. So now, based on, since now you have identified that your cement quality is not very good, poor, so what do you need to do? Think about this. So you need to carry out the risk mitigation analysis. So what are the consequences? Your cement is poor. The consequences could be, I'm giving only one example. Consequences could be, there is a communication to B annulus. And if the consequences is communication to the B annulus, that means the B annulus pressure, the sustained annulus pressure might go beyond the mass value, maximum allowable surface operating pressure. So what do? We need to carry out the investigation and place the appropriate mitigation. So this is where I was talking about the risk mitigation analysis. So what are the risks? The sustained B annulus pressure beyond the mass value. And that is because of the poor cement. What is the likelihood? Depending on the cement quality, the impact, likelihood could be different. But in this case, I could clearly see, in the previous case, I could clearly see, except a patch of cement, most of the cement has the channels. So likelihood is very likely. So I am giving a score of 4. And what will happen? What is the consequences? If it is beyond mass value, that means cement is going to fail at any point of time. So consequence is also very high, major consequences. Now we need to do the mitigation. So what are the mitigation? First of all, we identify, we need to do the diagnosis. So we identify, we monitor the casing pressure. Maybe that patchy cement is holding the formation pressures, not allowing to be not allowing to come to the annulus side. So we monitor the B annulus pressure. Also, we bleed it down and try to figure out what is the rate of influx, and can we periodically bleeding down, can we keep it below MAOP value, or we inject some fluids so that this pressure in the casing can be reduced down the MAOP value. And based on the frequency of the influx, there is another mechanism which we have installed in various wells. So we install the pressure relief valve in the B annulus and setting the pressure relief valve below the MAOP, and as soon as the pressure coming to the reaching that threshold limit, it gets bled off to the system. System means the surface system. So if we place this mitigation, then what we have actually reduced? We have not reduced the consequences. Consequence remains same. If it is going beyond mass, then it is a major consequences. But we are reducing the likelihood. By placing this mitigation, we are reducing the likelihood, the probability to rare or unlikely. So too rare or unlikely. So if it is the rare, then it is the moderate, or if it is unlikely, it is high. So with this mitigation, we can continuously, we can produce this well, and we need to review after a certain period, say for example 6 months, and do the investigation again, and this way the well integrity can be managed. Oh, I think I have done my presentation. So thanks a lot for listening to me, and probably it is the forum is open to everybody have discussions or putting some questions.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. I hope everyone is benefited and got the solution for their problems. If anyone has any queries, you can write it down in the chat box. Also, I would like to request everyone to fill up the feedback form link given in the chat box itself. Is there any queries?
There was a question from Kundil Fukon. He is asking two things. One is, what is the tertiary well control barrier? So tertiary well control barrier is applicable during the well intervention phase, during the drilling phase, during the workover phase, or during the well intervention with coil tubing and E-line. So what does that mean? Because when you are doing the intervention, some of your secondary barriers become null and void. Say for example, you are doing a coil tubing operation in a well. Before coil tubing operation, your secondary barrier was, your master valves. So anything goes wrong in the primary barrier, you can still close the barrier. However, while coil in the hole, your master valve becomes null and void. So you have the BOP on the top, and in case the BOP fails, then the BOP has one is pipe ram, that is the secondary barrier, but on top of that, the BOP also have shear seal ram. So that means that you can cut the downhole equipment or cut the tubing and close the well. So that is the tertiary barrier, and tertiary barrier is applicable when there is the secondary barrier fails. And he has also asked one of the questions on the Bhagam 5, what leads to the such catastrophic? Yes, the investigation is ongoing. I would not be, I am not part of the investigation team, or I do not have the access to exactly what has happened. However, it is very much clear that there are failures of the barriers, be it the technical barriers, be it the procedural barriers, or maybe people barriers, the competency. So we'll wait till the investigation teams come out with the their investigation, and then possibly one-to-one we can discuss later on also. But that is my comment. Okay.
So we have another question. How did you classify the Christmas tree valves as primary and secondary barriers? Why is the side wing valve considered as secondary valve? Also, the crown valve don't play any part in flowing well. So why it is also considered a barrier?
Okay. Now, very good question. During when the well is under production, I think I will go back to the slide so that you can visualize. Just hold on. Okay. So is it visible? Probably not, right? Is my slide is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this is a production well. Right. Okay, this is a production well. Right. So in this case, when the well is getting produced, this master valve, you say that why the Christmas tree is not considered as a primary barrier. This master valve is not a primary barrier. Primary barrier is all the barrier which is always in active condition and not allowing the flow coming out of the unintended region. So in this case, what is happening? The flow is coming from the formation. This bottom barriers is not allowing it to go towards the other zone. So Packer is holding it back. Packer is always active. So this is primary barriers. And the well is flowing through the master valves and going to the surface facilities. So what does that mean? These two valves are actually these three valves are in open condition. So open condition means these are not currently barrier in flowing well. What are the barriers? The swap valve. Swap valve is closed. So this is in contact with the fluid while flowing the well. So this is the barrier, primary barrier. The killing valve is in contact with the flowing fluid, the hydrocarbon fluid. These are the barriers, primary barriers on the Christmas tree. Remaining all are secondary barrier. So what does it mean? That if the primary barrier fails, then this tree cap, right? The tree cap or the blind flange in the killing site, that is the secondary barrier. And these are the secondary barrier but closable. In case you need to close, then only this become the secondary barrier. Am I clear? Yeah.
So we have another question.
Yeah.
So please explain about bleed out during mitigation task. How can we do that?
Bleed off. Bleed off during.
He's asking to explain out during mitigation task. How can we do that?
Okay, so you are possibly referring to the mitigation plan. I have cited the example, right? That is the B annulus bleed off. Is that correct? I think so. So he is talking about the bleed off during the mitigation plan. So your B annulus has a sustained annulus pressure, which is, by monitoring, you have identified that gradually it is going and it may cross the maximum allowable working pressure. Then in that case, you have to bleed off by putting this bleed off line either to a flare line or to the system, the production system. So you bleed off and then you also monitor for the build-up process. And once you establish, then because your flow line pressure would be close to, say, for example, depending on the distances from the surface facility, it could be 200 psi or it could be anything. But if it is below the maximum allowable working pressure, then you lay the line with the pressure relief valve and connect it to the system. And if it is not, then you connect it to your flaring system or any other system where you can bend it open. Correct?
Thank you, sir. We have more questions.
Yeah.
What are the advantage of using the kit line with fluid to monitor well head pressure during a well kill operation?
What is the?
What are the advantages of using the kill line with static fluid to monitor well head pressure during a well kill operation?
That is actually two things are mixed up. The wellhead pressure, if there is a wellhead pressure, then you cannot monitor the liquid level. That means your kill weight is not sufficient to overcome the formation pressure. So first of all, you need to identify, or you need to determine your kill weight fluid. And once you put the kill weight fluid during the workover, then you will not see any pressure. And what if you see the pressure, that means your kill weight brine is not sufficient to suppress the formation pressure. So you need to increase the weight. That is one advantage. Second is, if the fluid is getting lost, then you need to fill up the hole. And if you do not fill up the hole, then what will happen? At one point of time, the kill weight mud or brine would balance it out with the formation pressure, and formation will start kick off. So these are the two advantages.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. Sir, in the Christmas tree, they are having two types, T-shape and cross-shape. Why T-shape is used more than compared to cross-shape?
Cost.
Hello, sir.
T-shape is used. That means you do not have the killing site. Correct. So in a vertical side is the T, and only you have the flowing side. So that means you are flowing the well, and you do not want to have the additional killing side. That is a cost reduction, and you can still do the killing process by the swap valve. However, during the well intervention, it will be difficult. Then you have to put additional pumping sub on top of the swap valve, so that you can kill, or you can pump the kill fluid.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. So why the cement squeeze has less success during mitigation phase?
Okay, very good question. Because the point is, when the cement squeeze, you need to have a certain injectivity, right? And you are pumping the cement, which is the slurry. So you need to have a minimum flow passes. Now what happens, there's a lot of time due to the poor cement, there are channels. However, those are not sufficient to squeeze the cement through it. So that is the one of the major reason why the cement squeezing is not successful. But however, I have done certain squeezing mechanism which a different fluid. Say for example, because cement grain size is big, right? And if it goes through small ports, then because of the shearing, the cement gets separated. So it lost the purposes. So we, instead of doing that, we also can do some fine material, either the fine cement or some resin. So I have used in 2 or 3 occasions used the resin, which is the chemical. You pump it through the even the smaller channels, and it can very easily pass through the channels, and you wait for some time and it becomes a rock solid. I hope.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. The next question is, a coil tubing operation requires the Xmas tree swab. cap to be removed and replaced with a specific flanked crossover. Among the following, what should be the rig-up procedure? Option A, the old joint may be used if they are not damaged. B, the crossover should have a lower pressure rating than the wellhead pressure. C, the crossover should have a pressure test that is twice the wellhead pressure. And D, new ring joints, studs and nuts are to be used.
Okay, this is all depends on the operating envelope. Now, coil tubing rig up, you are doing a intervention through the swap valve. You need to rig up your BOP on the top of the swap valve. So BOP is your secondary barrier in this case. Now, the question is whether what kind of connections I am using. Is it a thread connection? Is it a lower pressure rating than the wellhead? Or it is a higher pressure rating than the wellhead? Or it is a flange type connection with a ring joint connection? So this all depends on the risk capacity of the well. So all the wells are not categorized in one category. So well can be categorized in various categories. Say for example, low risk well. What are those low risk well? Low risk well are those wells which does not have the capability to flow of its own. That means it is subhydrostatic. So in that case, you can use screw type or with a lower capacity, but you need to ensure that whatever the rig up you are putting, you are going to do certain treatment. You will be pumping. So everything has to be above whatever the maximum operating pressure you are going to deploy during the coil tubing operation. So your pressure withstanding capacity of any of the rig ups should be at least 10 times higher than the maximum operating pressure or maximum starting pressure of the well. And that is the more fundamental. Now, having said that, in a high risk well, which are the wells called high risk? The high risk well could be all the gas well is a high risk well, categorized as a high risk well. If the well is producing hydrogen sulfide, then it is categorized as a very high risk well. Then in those kind of well, your rig up procedures or the equipment capability should be completely different. You do not even use any kind of threaded mechanism. You use the flange mechanism so that you have the metallic seal. That is where you use the flange type connections. So it's all depends on your operating envelope, and that's why we have talked about in the barrier concept that what is the operating envelope. You need to decide at the beginning. You have to have all the data available, and then you go for the right kind of equipment, and this equipment should be capable to fulfill your functional requirement.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. Our next question is, why the SSV not considered a barrier during flowing well condition?
During flowing well condition, actually SSV, it is called subsurface control, subsurface safety valve, right? So SSV is in open condition. If it is closed, then this is not a it is not allowing your flow. However, subsurface valve SSV can be considered as a barrier during the flowing condition, but it cannot be considered as a barrier during if you want to do any kind of operation on the wellhead. If you want to do any kind of intervention, then you do not consider subsurface as a barrier. Subsurface surface control subsurface safety valve. However, you can very well consider this surface control subsurface safety valve as a secondary barrier, and it all depends on your company philosophy and company policy. Majority of the company that do not use it as a barrier, because what has happened, if you drop something on the flapper, then it's gone, the barrier lost. So you need to ensure that during flowing condition, yes, you can still use as a barrier in case of an emergency shutdown, but you cannot work on the wellhead using subsurface safety valve as a barrier because it is not rigid. And I think you got my point, right?
So moving on to the next question. What the tubing hanger made up of? On what basis are they differentiated as primary and secondary barrier?
Primary barriers, again, we do not need to confuse ourselves. The primary barrier are those barriers which are in direct contact with the hydrocarbon fluid at the first place. So tubing hanger is having two sets of barrier. The top sets is the primary barrier, and if the top sets fails, the second sets, which is a secondary barrier, so that is getting activated. And the metallurgy or the materials of the seal depends on the various factors, but mainly on the pressures, mainly on the fluid characteristics. What are the components of the fluid? Based on that, you have to select the materials of the rubber.
Thank you, sir. Now moving on to the next question. In context of the Baghjan blowout, suppose you have a blowout taken out for repairing the wellhead and you are solely dependent on kill fluid HP. In this case, if the primary barrier fails and no secondary barrier is present, what will be the mitigation procedure?
This is the wrong procedure. You are going to work in a wellhead and you want to remove your BOP. Then before doing that, you need to ensure that you have two barriers in place, and one of the barrier must be your mechanical barrier. Not even one, both the barrier has to be mechanical barrier, because now you do not have any closable barrier at the surface. That means you will not be able to, even mud is not considered as a barrier until unless you have the control. You have to have the control mechanism to replace it, to monitor it, right? So if you want to remove your barrier, where is the control? There is no surface control. Mud will be thrown out. So mud will never be considered a barrier for this case. I would go for two barriers, and that barrier has to be the mechanical barrier. And that is the bottom line.
Moving on to the next question. Sir, type of tertiary barrier?
Wellhead
Capping. Is a type wellhead capping a type of tertiary barrier?
As I said, I could not understand wellhead capping. Probably he or she is talking about the wellhead. Are you talking about the swap cap or? Okay, wellhead capping. I think. Okay, I got the point. Probably you were talking about the some of the plan like Baghjan where the capping is done. Okay, so that is not a tertiary barrier. Tertiary barrier is always has the cutting and sealing capability. That means when you do the intervention, like for the drilling rig, you are using the drilling BOP, and all the BOPs are having 4 rams: the pipe ram and the slip ram that is activated against the annulus, and the second one is your shear ram and the seal ram. So shear ram and seal ram is activated when there is a issue in a well control situation, And when there is an issue in the well control situation, then you need to activate and cut your pipe. And whereas that mechanism is available, that is your tertiary barrier.
Moving on to the last question, most probably. What is the difference between DHSF and CSSV?
I think he is talking about downhole safety valve and subsurface surface control subsurface safety valve.
Yes, sir.
Now, downhole safety valve could be different, and downhole safety valve, even the surface control subsurface safety valve also can be termed as a downhole safety valve, because it is on the downhole in a wellbore side. However, surface control subsurface safety valve has the control mechanism from the top. That means you are pressurizing the control lines, and then your safety valve gets open. Whereas downhole safety valve could be of different types. Apart from the subsurface safety valve, it could be of the blow down plunger type. So what has happened? Is spring loaded, and the well is flowing, and when it sees a certain differential pressure more than a designated pressure, then this gets activated. Downhole storm soak, it's called storm soaks. Or there could be some other downhole safety valve which can be installed with the wire line. So surface control, the difference is surface control safety valve is also a downhole safety valve. However, downhole safety valve is a generic term. Surface control safety valve is a subset of the downhole safety valve. So always surface control safety valve, you have to have the control from the control line, from the surface. And downhole safety valve could be surface control or could be some other mechanism.
Thank you so much, sir, for the informative question and answer session. Now I would like to hand over to Ananya to conclude the session with the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Respected faculty members, speaker, all the participants, and everyone associated with this session, it gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for the session to all the dignitaries assembled here. I, Ananya Datta, on behalf of SP Dibrugarh University Student Chapter, would like to express my heartfelt gratitude towards our guest speaker, Mr. Fanijoti Sharma sir, for sparing his precious time on enlightening the participants and sharing his expertise knowledge on the topic well integrity and barriers. We look forward to more such engagements with him in the future.
Thank you.
I would like to take this opportunity to extend our hearty thanks to the faculty members of the Department of Petroleum Technology of Dibrugarh University and the faculty members of Dibrugarh University Institute of Engineering and Technology who have blessed us with their presence. Our special thanks to our faculty advisor, Dr. Borkha Mes Das Mem, who have been a constant support to the chapter. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants for making this session a great success with your active participation and presence. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you, everybody, and particularly the Department of Petroleum Engineering and SP Forum, SP chapter, for giving me the opportunity to talk about. I hope I could make some justice to the topic. And thanks to all the industry experts participating from various locations, and hope to see you in some of the other forums. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.